In the North Sea, the Kinloch Bravo oil rig crew prepares to head home after months of hard work. However, Magnus, the rig manager, receives a call from the company with troubling news. The helicopters are diverted to assist the North Kilscore platform due to a power failure, delaying their pickup. Magnus attempts to inquire further, but the phone abruptly stops working. Communications falter throughout the building. Kat's call to her wife freezes, and Fulmer struggles to get the main radio operational. Magnus calls a meeting to explain the delay in departure, which sparks frustration, especially from Lars, who demands clear explanations. Suddenly, the entire building loses power, and Fulmer discovers that all generators are offline. While the battery backup maintains operations for now and the production module maintains pressure, a spike could pose a lethal threat to everyone. Fulmer attempts to contact the standby vessel, but the radio remains non-functional, mirroring the issues of the nearby oil platform. The rig experiences tremors, and the production module ignites, quickly spiraling out of control. Despite Rose's reluctance to shut it down due to falling short of quota, Magnus orders the module's shutdown for everyone's safety. Suddenly, the rig trembles once more, and thick, fast-moving fog envelops the structure entirely. Although Fulmer restores power, communication remains elusive, and the helicopters won't fly in such weather. Alwyn ponders if excessive drilling triggered a seismic event, but Rose, the scientist, dispels the notion. Magnus prioritizes communication repair, dispatching Fulmer and Baz to assess the radio tower. As they reach the top, Fulmer examines the machine, but he becomes angry when Baz accuses him of siding with Rose due to their relationship. Baz promptly apologizes, and while Fulmer releases him, Baz notices a dead seagull on the floor. Magnus and Lars wait at the tower's base when suddenly Baz falls. Kat and Rose hurry with a medical kit while Fulmer descends, puzzled as Baz was right behind him. Lars doubts his account as Baz's harness was unclipped. Kat stabilizes Baz in the medical bay, but they lack a surgery room. Lars panics as helicopters won't arrive in time. Rose shows Magnus the computer, revealing no pressure in the pipelines, indicating widespread issues among the rigs. Shortly after, Baz awakens, experiencing visions of underwater disintegration. Lars confronts Magnus in his office, but Magnus leaves, allowing Lars to search his desk and discover a private memo, enraging him. He gathers everyone on the helideck, revealing the company's deception. Magnus, seeing Lars with the memo, admits the company is abandoning the field, jeopardizing their jobs. Suddenly, ash falls on them, though no volcanoes are nearby. Baz arrives, warning, "It's already started," before fainting. Later, Baz awakens in the infirmary, unable to recall the incident. He recalls seeing something in the fog and hearing a strange noise at the tower. Baz becomes agitated when Kat attempts to draw blood and insists there's an incoming wave. After Kat sedates him, she informs Rose that Baz's wounds are healing rapidly. Alone, Baz feigns sleep but observes glowing spores aiding in his healing. In the rec room, the crew notices lights from the standby vessel outside the window, signaling for help but heading in the wrong direction. Alwyn tasks Lek with retrieving the Morse code message, revealing the vessel's plea for assistance. Magnus instructs Fulmer to signal back using the deck lights to glean information. He then visits Cook Merck to discuss rationing their food supply. Lars, confined in his room with Easter standing guard, grows increasingly agitated. In the infirmary, Baz awakens to find most of his injuries healed. Upon seeing his reflection, he envisions the rig's destruction. Returning to his room, he experiences intense pain as his gold tooth is pushed out of his mouth. Rose collects ash for analysis and advises everyone to remain indoors. Fulmer updates her and Magnus that the vessel lacks additional information. They lack communications, so waiting until morning means they can't use lights to guide the boat, risking a crash. Evacuation should happen now, but Rose hesitates due to potential legal repercussions. Magnus prioritizes safety and asks Fulmer to maintain guiding lights for the vessel. Alwyn replaces Lek and discovers Baz drawing strange circles on a window. Baz reveals his head is filled with noise and questions his survival. The room lights flicker, and Baz experiences another strange vision before fleeing. Lars removes a window from the wall to escape. Lek sneaks into the infirmary to steal rubbing alcohol and later attempts to shower. Suddenly, He experiences intense pain and begins vomiting blood, causing his tattoo ink to dissolve. Heather discovers him already deceased. Kat examines Lek but can't determine the cause of death. However, when Dunlin arrives with Baz's tooth, Kat suspects something is expelling foreign matter from their bodies. In the control room, Fulmer notices an unfamiliar light on the bridge. He and Alwyn investigate outside, but Lars, noticing them, extinguishes his flashlight and sneaks past. Lars re-enters through the door they used and locks it, encountering Heather along the way. Fulmer and Alwyn inspect the rowboats, and Fulmer accidentally injures his hand. Suddenly, the ash ceases to fall mysteriously. Lars heads to the control room and signals SOS with the lights, prompting the vessel to approach rapidly. Alwyn and Fulmer notice the signal but find themselves locked out, prompting Alwyn to search for another entry while Fulmer continues to call out. Heather hears Fulmer and fetches Magnus to help open the door. Fulmer informs them about Lars, and they hurry to intervene, almost escalating into a fight before Magnus urges them to focus on redirecting the vessel. Alwyn tracks flickering lights leading him to Baz, who insists on staying to witness the life in the water that started it all. Despite Alwyn's insistence, Baz grabs him, causing water to spout from Alwyn's mouth. Dunlin warns them of an approaching wave caused by the vessel's change in direction, prompting Baz to release Alwyn and flee. Dunlin pulls Alwyn's body from the water, and Magnus assists with CPR, but their efforts are in vain. Kat arrives and confirms Alwyn's drowning. Meanwhile, Rose examines the ash and discovers living organisms in it after dropping blood on it. She informs Magnus that the vessel initially left to aid another rig. In her office, Rose explains to Magnus and Kat that the ash contains parasitic spores seeking hosts, rapidly healing wounds in search of healthy bodies. They must limit exposure to the ash and monitor individuals with open wounds. Magnus permits Rose to collect blood samples from the entire crew for comparison with Baz's. In the mess hall, Heather observes the fog dissipating and notes the neighboring rig's complete destruction. Fulmer discovers Baz examining Rose's research and offers assistance, but Baz declines, claiming the light requires him. Rose joins them and notices Baz has taken his own blood sample. When she requests his cooperation, he flees. Upon learning of the incident, Magnus dispatches Kat to assess those with injuries since testing is halted. After isolating Fulmer, Magnus convenes another meeting. Now that the fog and ash have cleared, he tasks half the team with disinfecting the rig while the other half searches for Baz. Rose continues her investigation, uncovering spores previously seen fossilized in Earth's layers. They should have perished with the dinosaurs, but deep drilling has stirred a dormant nest. Outside, Baz discards his blood sample into the sea. His body fully healed, Baz tests the water tanks, instantly filling them with spores. Hearing James approach, Baz hides, but James discovers the spored water and calls for help, prompting Baz to silence him. Lars and Dunlin find James injured on the floor, noting spores in the water have begun sprouting plants. In the machinery room, Heather, Easter, and Merc discover plants growing on the oil. As the rig shakes, Dunlin notices James bleeding, who reveals a lost tooth, indicating infection. Frightened, James strikes Dunlin and flees. With the rig losing power, Magnus releases Fulmer from isolation to address the issue. Heather spots Baz and follows him to the mud pit, where Baz cultivates plants, claiming a million-year-old memory compels him to defend the place. James joins Baz, asserting allegiance. Heather's absence alerts the team, prompting Lars to search for her. Baz and James flee before Heather can inquire further. Fulmer restores power, but the team realizes the flare on the production module is missing. Disconnecting it from the electricity is vital to prevent an explosion, but the module control lies in the mud pit, risking exposure to spores. With manual reignition the sole choice, Fulmer volunteers despite the danger. Easter operates the crane to approach Fulmer to the module, but it's insufficient. Fulmer unclips his harness and moves closer for a clear shot. The flare reignites successfully, but Fulmer sustains serious burns and requires treatment in the infirmary. In the mud pit, Baz's worsening visions lead him to believe they must shut down the rig's system to halt the attack. James attempts to close the valve, but the pressured pipes pose a risk of explosion, prompting them to access the system at the source. After a visit from Rose, Fulmer, claiming he feels fine, dresses and joins to assist. Working with Rose and Heather on research, Fulmer unknowingly draws circles on a pad akin to Baz's. Magnus summons them to the control room, revealing Baz's attempt to bypass safety measures as causing dangerously high pressure. Remote control won't work, so they must use the Bullseye ROV. Easter guides the ROV, discovering underwater circles caused by earthquakes. Approaching the wellhead, the ROV shuts it off, enraging Baz. Attempting direct access to the CPU, Baz faces an alarm, requiring Fulmer's intervention. Suddenly, Easter's phone receives a message, revealing the restoration of communications. Magnus attempts to contact the Coast Guard while Fulmer searches online for the significance of the communicating circles. Rose investigates unknown containers found by Heather, uncovering a project named Serene, inaccessible to her. She also comes across Fulmer's drawings in the company's system. Kat contacts her wife, who reveals that the company assured families about the crew's well-being and mentioned ongoing electrical issues. Meanwhile, fog envelops the city, causing power outages on land. The internet signal drops, and Magnus's pleas for help go unanswered by the Coast Guard. Baz uses his spore powers to accelerate Fulmer's healing process. Fulmer begins hearing Baz's voice in his head and rushes to the bathroom to inspect his wounds. Rose notices his absence and finds Fulmer startled, seeing Baz's image in the mirror. Fulmer confides in Rose, who comforts him with a kiss, triggering a vision of her and Baz's suffering. Later, Rose discovers Fulmer's note and, with Kat's help, locates him heading to the mud pit. They find Fulmer inside, where the spores show interest in Kat's pregnancy. Rose pulls Kat away, and they witness a ship approaching the rig carrying survivors. Among them is Coke, a researcher from the company, who demands immediate access to the control room. Kat ensures the men are uninjured, and Easter is astonished to find his former lover, Harish, among them. Coke reveals that his rig exploded due to a pressure failure and emphasizes the importance of regaining access to the production module. Rose presses Coke for the reason behind his presence on the rig, but he remains evasive. In the infirmary, Harish shares a conflicting account with Easter. According to Harish, when Coke arrived, he dismissed several workers and instructed the remainder to assist in installing new equipment. Rather than extracting oil from the well, they were deploying something into it. As the fog rolled in and people started disappearing, Coke remained calm, seemingly familiar with the situation. He persisted with the equipment test, disregarding pressure warnings until the rig exploded. Heather checks the crew files against the list of survivors, but she can't find Coke's name. Easter and Harish inform her that Coke had used a temporary account created by the IT guy upon his arrival, and he erased all traces of the test before leaving the rig. Harish points out a strange name on the crew list that wasn't there before. Emails reveal that the organism had already spread, indicating Coke's prior knowledge, suggesting the company sent him intentionally. Kat notices Rose studying circles that resemble a tree, realizing it might be how the spores track time. The gaps between the rings signify major extinction events, and the last ring, closing quickly, marks the present, posing a threat. Coke explains that infected individuals caused the explosion on his rig by opening the well. He proposes sending a team to the production module, but Magnus rejects the idea, and Rose speculates that the containers and testing relate to the secret Project Serene. Fulmer joins Baz and James, noticing his mind is clearer than theirs. Baz explains that Fulmer hasn't been exposed to the spores for long, but they will soon take over. Baz offers to help Fulmer harness them if he agrees to handle the system. Fulmer starts working, but it will take some time to shut down the alarm. Dunlin, Lars, and Merc request a private meeting with Coke because they're tired of Magnus' poor decisions and are interested in Coke's ideas. Coke explains that they can incapacitate Baz by using the carbon dioxide from the secret containers. They need to enter the mud pit and connect the carbon dioxide to the ventilation system. The trio retrieves the canisters from the containers, but Dunlin grows suspicious due to the label indicating the carbon dioxide is mixed with something else. They take the canisters to the mud pit and link them to the ventilation shafts, wearing masks for protection. Baz sends James and Fulmer to investigate, and James encounters the trio first, only to suddenly vomit blood on them. They realize the carbon dioxide isn't rendering James unconscious, it's fatal, and it's also killing the plants, revealing Coke's true plan. Lars and Merc flee, while Dunlin hesitates until he's certain James cannot be saved. Fulmer attempts to deactivate the ventilation, but both he and Baz lose consciousness. In the control room, Kat discovers Coke sealing the doors around the mud pit after Lars and Merc escape, trapping Dunlin inside. Dunlin's oxygen runs out, resulting in his death. Heather and Harish inform Rose and Magnus about Coke's actions and confront him, but Coke justifies his behavior as necessary for survival. Magnus attempts to open the doors, but he cannot access the ventilation pits. Rose takes action and descends into the mud pit, borrowing a mask from Lars. She manually shuts down the ventilation system and then checks on Fulmer, who remains unconscious even after Rose shares her mask with him. However, when she inadvertently touches the plants, the spores react, causing Fulmer to regain consciousness. Together, they escape the pit as Baz also awakens, and the final ring closes underwater. Magnus meets with Harish to uncover the truth. Coke pushed the testing to its limits to annihilate the spores, viewing the loss of the rig as acceptable collateral damage for survival. The vessel sent for their rescue crashed, forcing them to wipe the system and escape on a small lifeboat, abandoning others to their fate. Magnus questions Coke, who reveals it was company policy to prioritize oil reserves and eliminate the spore. Coke was tasked to eradicate it to ensure uninterrupted drilling, fearing the spore's global spread if left unchecked. Magnus and Rose weigh their options, with Rose proposing an alternative to killing the infected. She suggests Fulmer, like Baz, might communicate with the spore to explore cooperation. In the pit, Baz feels the spore isolating him as another earthquake strikes. Fulmer uses a small plant to link with Baz and learns the spores aim to trigger a cataclysmic event. Rose highlights the spore's global presence, suggesting they persuade Baz to halt it. While Magnus favors Coke's approach, the others support Rose's plan, and Magnus grants permission to pursue it. Magnus, Rose, and Fulmer descend into the pit, where Magnus continues to see visions of his deceased son. They discover Baz amidst a cloud of spores, lamenting his failure. Coke seeks out Harish, proposing cooperation to complete his mission in exchange for rescuing Harish and his boyfriend with incoming helicopters. Suspecting Coke's ulterior motives, Harish covertly activates the microphones, prompting Coke to confess his intentions over the speakers. As the earthquakes intensify, the entire structure starts to fracture. Coke strikes Harish aside and initiates the explosion countdown, just as the helicopters establish contact. He flees to the helideck in a bid to escape alone, prompting Kat and Heather to pursue him while Easter assists Harish in preventing the impending explosion. Upon reaching the helideck, Coke encounters Lars, who seeks revenge, but the intervention of the girls prevents violence. Harish arrives to declare the explosion halted, signaling the need for evacuation preparations, and Lars confronts Coke with a punch before rejoining the crew. In the pit, Rose observes a change in the spore's behavior and makes physical contact. Though she begins communicating with the spore, an intense earthquake interrupts, prompting the others to pull her to safety. Baz opts to remain behind to demonstrate that humans can also contribute. Magnus, Rose, and Fulmer board the final helicopter, departing just before a tsunami strikes the rig, causing it to collapse as Baz merges with the spore. Kat observes the approaching tsunami and endeavors to alert the residents, but the pilots prevent her from doing so, citing Coke's directive that they are not returning home. As the tsunami strikes the city, it claims the life of Kat's wife. Don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications for more content like this. Thank you for watching.